Hi, my name is Terry Rich. I'm a birder and ornithologist here in Boise, Idaho. This presentation is one in a series on the birds of this area that I've been giving at the Foothills Learning Center just outside of Boise. And during our period of social distancing and being super safe with health issues, I am recording this with the help of Tom Carroll on Zoom. Tom is the administrator for the Idaho Birding Facebook page, so be sure to go and check that out. This talk, you have probably already found it because it is on my YouTube channel, which is Bird Talk with Terry Rich. And today I am going to be talking about what a great month May is for birders. It's by far my favorite month, not just because weather's getting nice and flowers are blooming and it's just a wonderful time of year to be outside, but all of our favorite birds are coming back from Mexico and Central America and even South America and starting to show up in our neighborhoods and our parks, singing like crazy because they're trying to attract mates and they're very pumped up for the breeding season. And so it's just a wonderful time of year to get out and see the new arrivals from the South, some of our local birds, which are really singing a lot now and when maybe they were quiet through the winter. And this talk is going to be focused almost completely on bird song. I'll talk about how you tell similar species apart, like robins and western tanagers and, say, Cassin's vireo. What are the sort of subtle differences in these bird songs? I will also be talking about some of the tools, the tips, the field guides, the websites, and even a little bit on bird recording, because if you can't figure out what a bird is as you're listening to it, it's easier and easier now to record songs on your phone. Tools are better than ever, and birds are going strong. So let's dig into these birds and see what we can learn. We're lucky here in Idaho to have just a bunch of really gorgeous species. Some of these we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute. But even if you don't want to get deeply into bird ID or you don't want to get deeply into bird song, which we're going to do a little bit today, go out and just look at these amazingly beautiful animals that are flying around our woods and singing their brains out right now. It's really a lot of fun, and the photographers are having a really good time. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. Well, we'll talk about it right now. Idaho Birding, the Facebook page that Tom Carroll administers, is where a lot of people are putting their bird photographs, and there are a lot of terrific photographers around the state. Almost every minute getting full frame shots of buntings and orioles and tanagers and osprey, every sort of thing. So it's a great place to go and just look at a lot of cool bird pictures and maybe help out some people who have a question about the identification. You get that once in a while, they'll post a bird and say, who knows what this is? So that's fun to see if you can figure it out, and also to help people identify what they've been taking pictures of. One reason I like to talk about bird song, and again, we'll spend most of this talk on song, is that you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out what a bird is by looking at it. In this case, this little brown and gray bird with, has little checks on the tail, a little white eye line. And you could maybe, if you don't know the birds very well, you could spend quite a bit of time flipping back and forth through your bird guide, and you may end up turning around in the sparrows for a while in this one, and you're never going to get this bird because it's not a sparrow. What's cool about birds is when as soon as they open their mouth, they tell you who they are. And in this case, this bird is singing, "I'm a Bewick's wren." Like maybe once every 5 or 10 seconds, he's saying his name. So it's really great to be able to identify these birds. And it's much easier to do it once you know the songs. Some birds are confusing, and we'll go over some similar songs, but a lot of them, as soon as they start singing, you know what you've got. And then you can decide if you want to spend a little time to chase them down, try to get a picture, or just go, yeah, that's great. That's a Bewick's wren. Now I'm going to go look for a chat or something else. In birds, males are typically the ones that are singing, although some females also singing. I'll give you a paper on that in a second. They're trying to not only attract females, but to tell other males that, hey, I'm here, this is my space. If you want to build a nest or get a female around here, just go a little ways away, and they space themselves out that way, and it's really a pretty civil arrangement. Get out expanses of habitat, everything's sort of spaced out, and then they don't have to fight about things. Learners and non-learners. There's two kinds of birds that learn their songs and birds that don't, and they typically, both types have a number of little calls, and these calls can be quite tricky and quite similar, little chip notes and so on. We're not going to go into that today, but you can learn those little very subtle differences in chip notes and call notes as well. The thing that's key here is that species differ from each other. That's why we can use song to tell what we're hearing and what we're going to see. We're a little bit lucky. Individuals among birds who learn their songs are also different. Now, if the song is inherited, like with a bunch of flycatchers who listen to those songs, they are just born with the song, and every Say's phoebe sounds almost exactly the same. Every willow flycatcher sounds the same. Every western kingbird sounds the same. But when you get over into the learners, get over into the chats and the warblers and the sparrows, learning their songs, every individual is different. And you can quite quickly pick up on that if you just stop for a minute where you can hear 2 or 3 song sparrows, just listen to them. It's a very good chance there's subtle differences in the songs you can tell right away. However, there's also a phenomenon called matching in song dialects, where those males will very deliberately choose to sing the same song that their neighbor's choosing. Sagebrush sparrow is one of my favorite birds. They definitely do this. Sometimes you can hear several birds singing, and then all of a sudden they're all singing the same song. So they're matching each other. And we think that's simply a way of saying, hey, I'm smart enough and I'm fit enough to do what you do, stay where you are, sort of thing. So we don't know. We can't get inside a bird's heads exactly, but that's one theory. So here's the article about female bird song in Birding Magazine. That's from the American Birding Association from April 2017. And it's really maybe not surprising, but female song has not been well studied. People are really focused on the males, and the more they sort of listen and track females, the more they're finding out the females are doing a lot more vocalizations than we thought in general. If you're interested in that, see if you can find that article, or send me an email and I will try to hook you up with it. My email will be at the very end here. There's also a nice article recently in Birdwatching Magazine from Eldon Gray on how birds learn to sing. That's just from about a year ago, June 19. So if you're interested in that whole process of learning, like I said, probably half the birds on the planet don't learn. They're just born with their song, but the other half are learning. So what goes on in the brain? How do they mimic their parents and the other birds they hear, and even other things they hear, mechanical sounds and so on, in the really good singers? A really good way to learn bird songs, of course, like anything, is just practice and practice. All About Birds website has a very good comparison of species set up, so you can go and look at how the plumage of a Cassin's finch and house finch differ. You can listen to the songs and see how they differ. Xenocanto is a global database of bird songs. For some species, there are literally hundreds of recordings. So if you want to know everything you can possibly know about Wilson's warbler, you can go to Xenocanto and listen to dozens or even maybe hundreds of Wilson's warblers. You get a real feeling for all the variation in those songs. And the app on the phone that I've come to like quite a bit is the Audubon Field Guide app. I find myself using it more all the time, even though I know most of what I'm seeing and hearing. It's really handy to have. It immediately pops up a picture and a bunch of different vocals and calls. So it's just a super handy thing to have right on your phone. In addition to the things I'm going to talk about today, it's always good to know and think about what time of year it is, because some species are not around your place in a particular time of year. What habitat are you in? I was looking at a picture today. I think somebody thought they maybe had a black-throated sparrow, but it was a bird hopping around on a lawn, apparently in an urban area, and it turned out to be a house sparrow. They look generally similar because they've got the big black sort of throat, but I don't think you would have a black-throated sparrow on a lawn as long as you lived. So knowing those habitats helps you go, yeah, it can't be that because they just would not be in this habitat. It's always probably most helpful to go birding with people who already know bird songs, those expert birders, and then they can tell you all those little details that they listen to when they hear something. And say, hey, you know, this is what I listen for when I listen to this bird, and that's why it's not that. So that you know, firsthand experience is hard to beat. That's the best. One other thing everybody can do is just learn the common species that are around your neighborhood, around your yard. Every time you go outside, just listen for what's going on. And it's like, oh, there's another house finch, there's a chickadee, and you get to know these really common songs. And then this time of year, when something new comes in, you'll be tuned in and go, wow, I've not heard that ever or for a very long time. What is that? And then go check it out and see if you can figure out what it is. Another way to do things is to record the songs, and I'll give you some good information on that in just a second. And then you can either go back and work on it yourself, or maybe just send the file to somebody and say, hey, I heard this, what is it? The song terminology has really been revolutionized in the last few years when Nathan Pipolo has done his field guides to the bird sounds of Western and Eastern North America, 2 different books. He's also got a website called Earbirding, and he has basically standardized the way we talk about bird songs. So I'm not going to show, we showed examples of all these last month. So today I'll just again point it out that he considers that there's 7 basic tone qualities, and that's it. That covers all bird songs. They're either whistled, hooted, clicked, fuzzy, nasal, noisy, or polyphonic. Similarly, 4 basic song patterns, songs where every note is unique, and the notes are also slow enough you can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 as a robin. Slow enough to count and notes repeated, and he calls those a series. And then the warble, the notes are too fast to count. It's like a house finch. They just really rattle off the notes. You can't count them, and they're all a little bit different. So it's very hard to say much more about it than they're too fast to count and they're all different. And then a trill, all the notes are the same, but it's too fast to count. It's this really rapid machine gunning of notes. Now, unfortunately, I mean, this is good. I like this categorization. Unfortunately, a lot of the birds we're trying to figure out are in the warble category, and or there's a bunch of them doing trills. So it'll get you maybe some way down the road, but it doesn't necessarily get you to the end. It's just a way to sort of think about what you're hearing. And then his sort of big categorization is his third way of thinking about it is whether the pitch of the song stays on an even keel from beginning to end, whether it goes up, goes down, goes up and down, or goes down and up. And you will hear every one of these sorts of things, and I find this to be pretty helpful. If people send me an email or call me and say, I heard this song, and one of the first things I like to ask is, did it go up or down the scale, or was it straight across? Was it really fast? Was it really slow? You can really narrow down fast when you've got that information. A really fun little game that you can play, one of many, many tools from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, is called Birdsong Hero. And just Google that and you go in. It's a little free game to play. But what's cool about this is, as it tests you, it shows you the sonograms of the songs. So in this case, it's going to show you 3 different birds, and that is along the x-axis, or along the bottom is time. And probably on each case here, we're talking about 2 seconds or so. And on the vertical axis, the y-axis is frequency. So you can see in all 3 of these cases, the frequency is going down, 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 and the notes are probably slow enough to count in each case. 3 notes, 4 notes, and what's that, 5 notes on that last one. So over here at Birdsong Hero, when you hit that arrow over there, it's going to play one of these 3 songs, and you figure out which one it is. This, for some people, really helps a lot because it helps put that visual piece into hearing. Sometimes just hearing doesn't click everybody's brain the same way, but when you can put in a picture too and go, oh, I can see that song now. You can hear it and you can see it in your mind. That really can help you crystallize what you're doing here. So go look at that. That's a real fun place to do a little quizzing. So let's get into the birds I want to talk about today. And For each of these birds, I'm going to show you a graph from eBird over there, and it is out of their bar chart section, and this is the entire year. So it goes from January 1st on the very left to December 31st on the very right. And I have put a red line at April 1st, May 1st, and June 1st, because this really helps. Remember, I talk about timing, knowing what species are here when. What species when is really important. So in each case, we can look at that information. So here, starting out with Say's phoebe, you can see that they're actually more commonly detected. This is Ada County, Idaho. I said that earlier. Ada County, Idaho, percent of checklists. So if people go out and return in 100 checklists for the county, this is what percentage of those lists have this species. So Say's phoebe detections are actually peak a little bit before April 1st. This is an unusual pattern, as you'll see. And then they sort of slowly drop off. What I like about Say's phoebe is it's a not too uncommon of a bird, and it's got a real classic, unlearned, inherited, simple song, and every Say's phoebe sounds about the same. Now they do a few other things. They've got a little twitter and a little chirp and some other things, but mostly you'll hear that little descending peer, and it carries quite a ways, and you can tell, again, right away, pretty much you've got a Say's phoebe. Nobody else sounds just like that. Another one of the flycatcher family that is fairly common all across the West, the western kingbird. I'll just point out how different of an abundance pattern. This is one of these birds that is totally gone in the winter. You can see the blue line down there. It's zero until just almost exactly April 1st. You see a little bump of kingbirds. And then during the month of April, as that blue line climbs, they come in numbers and then peak just a little bit after May 1st. So they're at their peak. This is May 11th in this recording. They're at their peak right now. Their peak of detectability. A lot of these birds, once they start to nest, their song rates go way down. And once they have young, some of them become quiet. They don't want to attract attention to the eggs or to the young. So now is when they're being detected. So again, western kingbird, another bird that has a inherited song, and they all sound about the same. So they've got that, they always sound agitated, sort of like Kilder. They always sound like they're just annoyed about everything. That's how they do it, and they get going very early in the morning. We had a pair nesting in front of our house in Shoshone, Idaho for several years when we lived there, and they were even ahead of the robins, and they start doing that twittering and wake you up at something like 4 in the morning. So I really, I get a kick out of them despite the loss of sleep. Dusky flycatcher, there are several of these little flycatchers that can be very difficult to identify by looking at them, and they're the Impidnax flycatchers. A lot of people are getting pictures, and a fair number of people know what they're looking at, putting them on Idaho Birding Facebook page. These little guys, you can see first off, the return rate is even later than the western kingbirds. They're not even coming in until the middle of April, and then peaking way out there somewhere in the middle of May. And look at how the vocalizations drop off by June 1st. The vocals are way down. So they get in here and get really busy. They've got a really simple little twittery call. Doesn't have the gusto of a western kingbird, but it's got that same kind of pip pip tweet tweet sound. Oops. Missed the button. There it is. So just pip pip tweet, up and then down. And that can vary quite a bit, but it's basically just a few little chip notes. And that doesn't give you a lot to work with, but when you listen to these other little flycatchers that look similar, you can see they're pretty different. So here's a willow flycatcher. Now here's where habitat also is really helpful. This dusky is going to be, right now, of course, migratory birds can be anywhere, but these guys are going to end up breeding up in a little higher elevation in the mixed conifer mountain shrub community up in the mountains. Willow flycatchers can be up high too, but they're almost always along creeks. But mainly what we want to talk about is vocalizations today. And again, you can see like the dusky, these guys really aren't even showing up until May and peaking at exactly on June 1st, in this case in Ada County. Now this impinax has a really very distinctive call that you should not mistake for anything else. So that's described as Fitzbew. You can hear a very explosive note and then that buzzy note. Very distinctive. Carries actually pretty well, considering they're often around noisy water. And again, a riparian bird with a very distinctive call, should not be confused. There's nothing else sings, no other bird does that. Now, the gray flycatcher is more apt to be out in juniper, bitterbrush, sagebrush country, especially tall sage. You've got shrike, loggerhead shrikes around, you might have gray flycatchers. Again, the song is a little hard to describe. It's not so clean as the Fitzbew, so easy to describe, but it's a very distinctive, I call it a splat or a blat. The note's very fat, not chippy or tweedy. So that real blunt blat or splat sound, not tweedy, not chippy, not, it doesn't have any really high notes. It's just kind of a flat sound. Very distinctive for this impinax flycatcher. And once again, if you look at the peak of detection on this bird, it's just really stunning. The middle of May, you've got a big peak, and then they just drop off a lot really fast. And it might be partly the habitat in Ada County. Out in the Great Basin and big patches, like I said, a bitterbrush, juniper, lower elevation, the Wahi Plateau area, you'll get gray flycatchers. There was a nice paper, again, in Birdie Magazine from the American Birding Association from March 2009. Now, this is talking about the proportions of the bird, not the song, but I thought I'd throw it in there because we can all use all the tools we can get our hands on to tell these little impinax flycatchers apart. When they're singing, not so bad. When they're not singing, it can be pretty tough, especially if you don't get a really good look at everything about the bird. Another flycatcher, I'm starting out with the toughest group of all because they've got these unlearned songs and they're kind of not real remarkable, but they're distinctive. Another bird that comes in pretty late, look at the bar graph there, just barely starting to show up by May 1st and then accelerating rapidly through the month of May. They also have a very distinctive song, even though it's learned and doesn't vary from one to the other. So that sort of buzzy high call, these guys are going to be up in ponderosa pine along the rivers, usually fairly high in the trees. And that song, again, it's pretty distinctive. I don't know anything else you can confuse with that. So check that song out and get it in your arsenal, and you'll know when you've got a peewee. Even more distinctive among these flycatchers with their innate songs is the olive-sided flycatcher. We don't get a lot of them around here, but they're up in the higher forests and especially a little bit more north of here. Once again, coming in through the month of May from 0 to their peak throughout the month of May. And they have a classic song that's been described all over the hemisphere, all over North America anyway, as Quick 3 Beers. Now, the other thing about this, oops, he's going to keep going now after he wouldn't sing at all. Now he's not going to stop. Here we go. So another thing about this bird that's really obvious in this photo is they've got a real, what's called a vested appearance, light down the middle and then this real dark vest. But you have to be a little bit careful because sometimes Western wood pewees can give you that same kind of a look. These guys are bigger, they got a bigger bill, they got a peak on their head, they got a lot of their field marks. But once you hear the vocals, you know you've got an outside-sided flycatcher. So another bird that has an innate song is a common nighthawk. I've not seen one yet as of May 11th, and if you look at their detection in Ada County, they don't peak until almost the middle of June. And I was looking at some data a few weeks ago for northern Idaho. They may not even show up until after the 1st of June. So this is one of the last birds to come north. They winter the Amazon basin. They're insect eaters, obviously flying around, and they need bigger insects. And I like swallows that can make a living on little gnats, things we can't see. They need something a little bigger. So they, I think, have to wait for that insect flush to really get robust. A very distinctive song, and you can hear this when they're flying around in the evening. You may not even be able to see them, but you can hear this a long way, and it's very distinctive. And they'll just do that over and over. Always almost exactly the same. They also dive periodically and make this whooshing sound. So look up common nighthawk if you don't know their diving sound. And this is a fantastically interesting bird. Always look forward to seeing these guys in the evenings. You're out camping, especially in lower country in early June. You can have quite a few nighthawks around, and it's always a real joy for me to hear these guys. The common nighthawk's little cousin, whippoorwill. These guys just seem to be super nocturnal. I usually hear them in the middle of the night when I'm laying in my tent, and absolutely unmistakable. So poor Will, poor Will, poor Will. And of course, that's same group as the whippoorwill in the east, and some others that say their names, I guess, or we have named them by their songs, I guess is more likely what it is. These guys are very hard to come by during the day. I've only by chance stumbled on them while they're roosting, again in the juniper zone, in the Owyhee Plateau, not too high, rock rims, but at night, probably any night in their habitat, you're going to hear them. And again, look at how late they come in. They're peaking after June 1st. So another big bug eater that has to wait for the big bugs. I play a house finch. It's our most commonly detected bird any time of the year in Ada County. And you can see, because they're a resident, they don't have that same pattern as a migrant where there's no birds and then there's a lot of birds and then they disappear again. These guys are around all year, and you can see the detectability actually peaks later in the summer, and maybe after the young are out and you got more birds singing. But I just throw the house finch in because this is a bird that's very common, and you can learn to listen and pick up all the different things that house finches do. These guys, I think this is the first song learner I'm showing so far, so they can learn, they can improvise, and they can do a lot of different things. So let's listen to it. And this is a classic warbler, too fast to count, and every note's different. Yes. And one thing I always like to point out with these guys is very often at the end of the song, they've got this little rising buzz. It's almost like a siskin. We'll just listen to maybe one more and see if you can pick up the last note in the song. Up the scale right at the end. They almost always do that. Not every time. Again, they're song learners, so they're free to improvise a bit, but that's pretty typical. And I haven't heard Cassin's finch do that. So here's their cousin, the Cassin's finch. Again, this is May 11th. I've never seen so many Cassin's finches around Boise as I have this spring. I had a flock of 22 on the river the other day that I've never seen that. There seem to be 2, 3, 4, 5 almost every time I go out and look around. So they're pretty distinctive to look at because of their big white eye line, and their bill's different, and their color's actually a little different. The song is quite similar to a house finch. What I listen for in these guys, and I'm not always positive if I can only hear the bird, they're a little more musical. And again, they don't seem to ever have that little rising buzz at the end of the song. So if you got this really rapid jumbling finch singing, keep listening. And if it doesn't have that little buzz, it's a good chance you've got a Cassin's finch. I just got my first warbling vireos today, again, May 11th. This is a good example of a bird also singing a warble, too fast to count. Every note is a little different, and they've got a little bit of a buzzy quality. So very fast, buzzy, and they'll be in the deciduous vegetation. And because of their, pretty plain plumage, they're just kind of pale gray with a little bit of white. They can sort of disappear in the leaves. You might have trouble getting your eyes on them. But listen for those buzzy notes. Another bird that we have all year round. It's a real good example of a song learner with a complex song, just more complex than that warbling vireo, is a song sparrow. And I'm going to play one more of that after I say these words. These guys, are often skulking around in heavy vegetation along the river. They can be on the ground. They're actually quite a pretty little sparrow, but if they're down in dark, shady vegetation, they might be a little bit hard to get your eyes on. These birds almost always start their song with 2 to 5 notes on the same pitch. Let's listen one more time. So that one had three opening notes on the same pitch and then a jumble. And those 3 opening notes on the same pitch, or 2 up to 5 maybe, that's a really good field mark for an oral field mark for song sparrow. All right, here we are to the bird who sings its name, Bewick's wren. I put Bewick's wren next to song sparrow because they can sound very much like a song sparrow. Bewick's wrens have a tremendous repertoire of songs. They can just sing dozens and dozens of different sorts of phrases, but a lot of the quality really sounds to me like a song sparrow. We did a training course in Palm Springs a few years ago on birdsong, and these guys really threw me for a loop, and we finally decided if you can't tell what the bird is, it's a Bewick's wren. That's how many tricks they have up their sleeve. So let's listen to this guy, also in riparian, also skulking around like song sparrows. You can see how the quality is similar to that of a song sparrow. Maybe this guy's a little bit more musical. There's almost always some kind of a long trill, whereas the song sparrows are usually doing more jumbled and complex notes. So if you're getting a lot of trilling and maybe don't have those 3 opening notes, don't think you necessarily have a song sparrow. Check it out. See if you can see this Bewick's wren, which looks pretty different actually. Yet another bird in that same riparian, skulking around down low in the shrubs, in the shadows, singing a very fast learned song, very fast, complex learned song is house wren. So I think one of the keys about this, it's just so fast. And actually the little trills are actually little repeated segments of notes. Three or four, three or four, three or four, three or four, very, very fast. There are a lot of house wrens in Hull's Gulch if you want to go up there and practice. Go to the Grove Trailhead and go up into the woods there, and you get a lot of house wrens. You can listen to all the things they're doing and kind of get them in your mind. I want to play two birds that have a up and down part of their song that's very distinctive. The first is a ruby-crowned kinglet. And what's interesting about this song is they do some twittering around and everything else, but it's the latter part of the song where it goes up and down really fast that is distinctive about this bird song. Well, that last bit, that weety, 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 that will give you a ruby-crowned kinglet every time, typically up in the forest during the breeding season. And they're so small, you know, you might not see them. They're very active. They can kind of hide out a little bit up in the trees, but they just belt that song out. And when you get that up and down sequence, you know you've got a ruby-crowned kinglet. Another bird with very different habitat that has a very up and down song is common yellowthroat. They're out in the cattails. Although I saw one in the sagebrush a couple days ago. That's a nice thing about migration. These birds any bird might show up anywhere pretty much. So it's kind of exciting when they're way out of their normal habitat. Once more, a striking bird, but can be really skulky and hiding in cattail marshes. But this song is utterly unique. And again, they learn their songs, but the ones I've heard all around this country typically have some fashion of an up and down song like that. When you combine that with the cattails, you got a common yellowthroat. I play a robin. Everybody knows robins, but again, it's a really excellent example of a bird you're going to hear a lot around the neighborhood, most likely, depending on, of course, where you live. But a lot of robins around. Their songs are all similar, but each one is a little different. They learn their songs. So that's a classic example of a whistled song, phrases slow enough to count, every note different. And then they have a bunch of other calls, especially when they're agitated or they detect a predator. So you get to hear two of them. They're actually doing that, what seems to be some kind of an alarm note. Okay, so a bird that has just come in, you can see the arrival dates here, April 1st, May 1st. So just a little, right at the end of April, the black-headed grosbeaks start coming in. Like many of these others we've shown, they have a rapidly ascending peak to middle of May, where they hit their peak of abundance. And I put them next to the robin because they sound very much like a robin, but they sing faster and the notes are a little higher, but they're very, very clear whistles. If you get a fast robin and a slow grosbeak, they can overlap. So usually you can tell by the quality. To me, these notes the grosbeak notes are what I would call sweeter. They're more pure. They don't have quite, they may have a little higher frequency, and usually you can pick them out, but they can overlap, again, among those birds that are, the slow grosbeaks and the fast robins can get pretty close. Another bird that has the same pattern of song as grosbeaks and robins is the western tanager, but this is where the buzzy quality really helps tell you what you're listening to, and it's a bit slower usually, but not always with western tanagers. What we're going to listen for is the buzziness of these whistled notes. So very robin-like phrases, a little faster, more like the grosbeak, but they got that buzzy quality, more like some of the vireos. A lot of the vireo songs have a buzzy quality. That's a really good field mark for telling these guys apart from other more whistled singers. Speaking of vireos, so the Cassin's vireo, really similar to the Western grosbeak, or the Western tanager, I'm sorry, in the nature of the song, but buzzy phrases, but quite a bit slower. So the speed of delivery here is really important for these vireos. So I think it's pretty obvious how much slower they are. They like sing a phrase and then think about it, and sing a phrase and think about it. Whereas the Western tanager just kind of keeps bringing them. And you get both Cassin's vireos and Western tanagers breeding in the same ponderosa pine habitat in early summer when you're camping. Listen for these guys and watch for them and see if you can tell which one you're hearing. We don't have a lot of warblers in the West. I ran into a guy who had just moved from Louisiana up in Hulls Gulch the other day, and they're used to 30 or 35 species of warblers in spring migration, and mostly heading up into the boreal forest of Canada. But we have yellow-rumped warblers, and you can see they can be detected any time of the year around here. I'm always sort of interesting. It's always interesting to me when I'm walking my dog in January to come onto a few yellow-rumped warblers in my neighborhood foraging in a tree. But you can see by the curve, they're here pretty much all year. Note the detections really drop off in July, and that may be just when they have young and they're just not singing much. I think they're still around here. And then they have a big peak again in the fall, which is an interesting cycle of detection. So these warblers have there's a fairly typical warbler song altogether. It's two parts, not real strong, kind of a weak little notes, but usually two parts on two different pitches. So that's real classic. Now these guys are learning their songs too, so they all do something a little bit different. Listen for that two parts, in this case higher and then lower, and not too much punch. This song doesn't carry very far. This is typical of a lot of different species of warblers, and they can be a little tricky to tell apart until you really practice on them. The orange-crowned warbler, one of the plainest birds in North America, will end up breeding up in the mountain shrub zone. And they also have a little two-part song, but compared to yellow-rumped warbler, it's quite a bit faster. It's like two faster trills on two different pitches. And then if you picked it up, there's a western wood pewee and a Cassin's finch singing in the background. So go back, rewind that, and listen to those two as well. So that's classic. Those birds are all together in the mountain shrub community breeding. But again, two-part song, fairly fast on two different pitches. Often the second half is lower, but not always. The Gillibray's warbler, another mountain shrub community bird who loves the dense thickets of ceanothus and willow and dogwood and whatever you can find up high. Gorgeous warblers you can see, and there have been some nice pictures on Idaho Birding just in the last week. This bird has got a much more forceful song, and I always think of whack, 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 whack. So it's kind of two-part, but he belts those single notes out. It's not the little delicate trill, kind of trill notes you get from orange crown, or the little sort of weak notes from yellow rump. This guy belts them out to my way of thinking. Well, you may not think of that as belting it out, but if you listen to these guys a little bit, you'll be able to tell they've just got more punch behind their notes. Wow, the most common warbler by far during the breeding season here is yellow warbler. You can see they start coming in about the middle of April, and then they just descend. I think I had 18 or 20 this morning in Hull Gulch. There seemed to be one around every corner. And the very classic sweet, 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 you're so sweet, or please, please, pleased to meet ya. That one actually doesn't follow that pattern very well. Let's keep listening. Yeah, that one actually doesn't follow the classic pattern at all. I get a different sound clip. But real fast, pure whistle notes, again, on two different pitches. And they're so common and so conspicuous, usually can get onto a yellow warbler a lot quicker than maybe an orange crowned or one of the more skulkies like McGillivrays, which can be hiding out a bit more. I haven't heard a catbird yet. Maybe I haven't seen a picture yet either, so I'm not sure if they're here. You can see, again, their arrival is they just all come in over a period of a few days. Another skulky bird, but what a great song. So these are mimics. They're in the thrasher family, mockingbird family. And these guys, sort of by the name of their family, really know how to sing. They really know how to improvise. And they just do an enormous variety of calls. So for these guys, you want to kind of listen for, it's sort of a quiet mimicry going on. They don't really knock out the notes like a chat or a loud singer, but they have a great deal of variety. They're going to be in the same habitat with chats in a lot of cases, sort of hiding in the dense shrubbery and singing their heads off. But a quieter, more varied song. They don't have the loud chat, peek, 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 beep, beep, chatter, chatter, chatter. Chats are much more forceful and a little more repetition. The catbirds kind of ramble on, more like a sage thrasher, actually. And then they have this call that's pretty distinctive, although some towhees do something very similar. Well, that's why they're called catbirds. When I was a kid, I always thought they were saying Terry, so it's been one of my favorite birds my whole life. Speaking of, this may be my favorite bird, period. Everybody's having a good time getting pictures of chats right now. They're a pure joy to record because they are so diverse, so loud, and even though they may not always show themselves, they are very good at just sort of sitting there and belting out the notes. So if you want to record birdsong, this is a great one to start with. Let's listen to a little yellow-breasted chat. All right, he'll go on for many minutes, even this one clip I have. Fabulous stuff. And if you notice, again, you might want to rewind and compare to the catbird. Again, this guy has a lot more repetition. He pauses between the different things he does, and the catbird just sort of rambles and rambles out the note, rolls out the notes, and they're all a little different from each other. Bullock's orioles, boy, are they around right now. The trees are just full. They're chasing each other. They're often way out in the sagebrush right now. I always find that interesting because you don't see like the tanagers and things going out in the sagebrush, but like the orioles do there. They seem to be riparian birds, but they love to run out into the sage and the bitterbrush, and they even get on the ground. So pretty different in some of their behaviors. They have a pretty distinctive song. Once you kind of get in, it's very hard to describe. I don't even know how to describe this exactly. So let's listen. If I can find the play button. It's kind of a video game doing that. Here we go. So that little squeaky up and down is pretty typical. The chatter that they have and the chatter that a chat has can be very similar. If you just hear that chatter, sometimes I can't tell which it is until I hear a little bit more. But both species give themselves away as soon as they switch from the chatter to something else. Another bird that's, wow, talk about a photographer's favorite, often perched fairly low in the shrubs, unmistakable plumage. And this is a bird that has a fast song, but the notes are paired. And if there's some apps where you can listen to the song, slow it down, and listen, you can hear that it's doing a lot of paired notes, not all, but a lot of them are paired. And that's how you can sometimes tell it apart from an American goldfinch or a lesser goldfinch, which sing also sort of a ringing, fast song with a bunch of different notes. If I can find this play button again. So pretty loud, clear notes, but like I said, often paired. And if you listen a little bit, you can pick up on that pairing. Another bird that's a tremendous mimic. We don't often appreciate how much mimicry American goldfinches are doing because their notes are quite high pitched and they tend to just kind of get together in groups and chatter and twinkle on with their little notes. It's a little hard to pick out other things. You could actually hear some pairing in that bird's songs before it switched phrases. So again, the quality, sort of ringing high notes, in this case, some repetition. You can see why buntings and goldfinches can be easily confused depending on the bird and exactly what they're doing. Lesser goldfinch has a lot of the same tricks up its sleeve. It can do a lot of different calls, but it's got a very, very distinctive descending, almost mournful peer note that you hear these birds twittering on. Wait to see if you hear this, and if you hear the peer, then you know you've got a lesser goldfinch as opposed to American. I've not heard Americans do this. That one actually didn't have too many of the really distinctive peer notes. I think I heard 3 or 4. But you get a little descending, mournful note in there, and then you can tell you've got a lesser as opposed to an American goldfinch. A lot of times they just do the peer, the descending peer note. A really super cool bird, another skulky bird of higher elevation shrublands, juniper, bitterbrush country that can kind of stay down and out of sight. Green-tailed towhee, very cool looking bird who's got a lot of diversity in the songs they do. You can hear a few little phrases that are very much like what the spotted towhee and the old rufous-sided towhee, where they were split, got credit for the singing "Drink Your Tea." So 2 notes and then a long trill. You'd hear a little "Drink Your Tea" in there with this guy, but he also throws in a bunch of other notes. Tremendously varied. But when you're in that habitat, probably the only other thing that's going to sound anything similar, anything like a green-tailed towhee is a lark sparrow or a spotted towhee. So let's listen to spotted towhee. Now, there used to be, as I said, rufous-sided towhees across the U.S. before they split them. And the eastern ones sing the "Drink Your Tea" just routinely. That's what I grew up with in Wisconsin. Out west, not so much. A lot of times they just do the long, trill T note. I forgot what a classic one that one is, actually doing "Drink Your Tea." That's a little unusual. Let's listen to this other clip. So if you recall, I said that the catbird call by which it got its name and that this spotted towhee have this little cat-like call from the underbrush. So if you just hear that, you might want to keep looking until you're sure which species you've got. Now, spotteds are more in dry habitat around here than catbirds, in the like kind of dense, more riparian vegetation. Spotteds will be more out in the country, more in drier types of sagebrush ravines and things like that. Well, let's talk about a few trilled songs. So the chipping sparrow, absolutely classic. Notes too fast to count, all on the same pitch. And that trill has been described as dry and insect-like. In other words, there's no musicality, no ringing to it. It's just a really flat, sort of featureless trill on one pitch. So that's pretty reliable description. And there's a few things you can confuse a chipping sparrow with. One of them is brewer's sparrow. Brewer's sparrow has a big repertoire of songs. They do very long, rambling trills that are spectacular, but their typical song is from 1 to 3 trills. And I've heard some brewer's sparrows with a single trill that sound just like a chipping sparrow. Now that happens to be an absolutely classic brewer's sparrow. 2 trills, the first one higher, the second one lower. Absolutely classic. But if they just do that first part, and some of them do, just a single trill, they can sound very much like a chipping sparrow. And if you get sagebrush up against juniper or limber pine, like out by Craters of the Moon, you can have both birds right next to each other. And it may not be immediately obvious which one you're hearing. So western meadowlark, one of my favorite birds. I think everybody loves these birds because they're such great singers. And they've got a couple of different songs. So the classic song and then that real loud descending pure. And early in the season and late in the season when they're kind of running out of steam, you'll hear them doing a lot of that sitting around the sagebrush without the song. They've got a few other things they do. So a lot of chucking. And then finally, and that crazy thing is their flight song. If you watch them, they'll do their songs, they'll do their chucks, they'll do their peers. And then when they take off, they switch to this. So pretty crazy little series of notes right there. And I've never seen them do that while they're perched. So when you're out there, you can hear these metal arcs. As soon as you hear that, you know a bird is moving from one perch to another, or whatever good that'll do you. I think this is our last bird song, and then we'll finish up with a few other things. So here's a bird that everybody wants to see. Look at the occurrence here, coming in late May, peaking on June 1st and then vanishing. If you look on the y-axis, you'll also notice that the detection here is like almost zero. So in Ada County, your odds of getting this bird are really slim. But let's listen to it before we see what it is. Play it one more time. So if you're out in the riparian areas, Garden Valley, along the Snake River, really anywhere, keep your ears peeled for yellow-billed cuckoo. There's quite an effort to find out basically every single bird that's in Idaho. There aren't very many, but if you hear that or see this bird, a lot of people really want to know. And if you turn it into eBird, they're probably going to challenge you. So get a recording on your phone, get a photograph, and report it. And we'll add it to what we know about this bird that's quite rare in this part of the world and declining across the West. All right, a few other things besides the birds themselves. A few things about sound recording. I have one of these parabolas I've used for decades. It's a fabulous recording device, but they're pretty kind of unwieldy because they're kind of big, but they really allow you to focus in on the bird song. If you get serious about recording, you can go there. If you don't want to get so serious, I've actually had pretty good luck with my phone. There's some smartphone recording techniques that you can see there. Go to eBird, Macaulay Library, and look for their advice on recording. You don't want to use the phone's built-in recording app because that's designed for human voices, so it doesn't have the frequency response. You need apps that can pick up those really high frequencies. And there's several. RecForge 2 is what I use, but there's several. They're free. You can get them for Android or iPhone. And then you just have to figure out where your mic is on your phone. You may not know where it is, and point that mic toward the chat, and you will get a very good recording. And you can upload those sound clips right to eBird along with your checklist. So that's kind of a fun thing to do, especially when you got a bird really cooperating, and you can just say, I can record this, whatever it is, and add it to the library there. That's really great fun. Adds another dimension to what you can do out there. There are different, again, free, or at least some of the stripped down versions of Tree. This doesn't look very stripped down to me. Audacity. There's sound recording programs that you can get for your home computer. If you want to look at these files, if you want to edit them, one thing I find that's really handy in Audacity is you could just take the sound file right off your phone, put it in there, and then you can run a filter filter out low frequencies. That's usually where we're getting this noise that wrecks the sound file. You got a fixed wing flying over you, which seems to be always the case around the Boise foothills. You can set that filter at about 3,000 and it'll pretty much take out that drone. So any kind of low traffic noise, maybe, boy, leaf blowers are hard to get rid of, but anything that's kind of a low drone that you don't want, you can filter out in Audacity, and it's pretty straightforward to use. Then you get a nice clean clip where you're just hearing those higher frequencies of your song, and you can upload that or just, mess around with it for fun. Raven Light is the sort of stripped down version of Raven, which is a more serious software. Again, everything seems to be from Cornell, just about everything. Another way to go with song analysis. And if you really get deep into it, then you're probably going to pay for the pro version and do whatever you're going to do with all those songs. I just wanted to point out my channel where this is, Bird Talk with Terry Rich on YouTube. That's where my other talks have been. Thanks to Tom, we're getting more of these recorded. We've got a few more to do, I think, Tom. And try to get those up there so you can watch and listen at your leisure. But what I really want to point out is in the last 2 months, we've been live streaming our Western Screech Owls from the box in our backyard. And if you look over at the very first box under my picture, there's going to be a little red Live Now button, and that's the live feed from the box. They get going. The interesting stuff starts happening about 9 at night when the female leaves to go get food and the male starts delivering food. So we have quit binging on Netflix. We are watching owls from 9 until midnight, trying to figure out what food is being brought in as the young get older. It's really been interesting to watch. So go over there and have a look. We also have a blog if you want to keep up on a few of the notes that aren't just some videos and some pictures in here, but a few other things. And I haven't updated this one yet, but YouTube, after kicking us off like 20 or 25 times for some violation we could not figure out, copyright violation, every time I appealed to them and I said, hey, this is an owl video that you're watching here. These are owls. Finally today, May 11th, I got an apology from YouTube, and they said, oh, okay, we approve your owls. And we've been streaming now for 24 hours without getting booted off. So I think they had robots inspecting this thing, and the robots did not know what they were looking at. But either the robots learned or some humans got involved, and now YouTube is cool. And we're very happy because it's a free service. So, some of the other services you have to pay for. And this is really nice, and we've had a lot of fun with it. So go look at owls. Thank you so much for listening today. I am always interested in your feedback because we all learn about birds, especially bird song, but everything about birds from other people. And I find that a lot of people have experiences that I have not had, and they have tricks and tips about bird song identification that I don't know about, and I'd love to hear about that. One of the downsides of doing these things by Zoom is that you can't sit there in a room with others and have them raise their hand and go, hey, I know how to tell Hammond's flycatcher from a dusky flycatcher. You know how to do that. Check my email. It's the last slide in the talk, and send me a note, and I would be happy to share what you know with others.